Today we're going to talk about the doctrine of entire sanctification and holiness. First, I'd like to start out talking about the priestly. The priestly contains several things. One thing, a couple of things in particular, are the Ten Commandments or the Decalogue. It's a way of being, way of living within the world. And one thing we see this within the Decalogue is the first commandment of do not have any gods before me. And this is a statement where God says, I'm calling you in relationship. And if you choose to have another God in front of me, you are breaking the relationship. And this means there's an ethic to it, and there's the holiness code involved in this, and that it's the way that we have ethics as a people. We begin to do certain things and not do certain things based off of what Christ has called us to be. Which leads us to the prophetic, which we begin to see all throughout the Old Testament within the major and minor prophets, in which the prophets are calling out the Israelites for not caring for the other, the marginalized, their neighbor, and not loving their neighbor. And they're continually called out for not doing this. But yet the priestly calling of the Ten Commandments, the way of being, it calls us to live out this social justice. It's a reason why we do this social justice, is because of the priestly, the ethic that we are called to have, which in distinct makes us the very distinct and very separate people from the rest of the world, that we care about the other, that we realize that we need the other, or we love our neighbor. It's not necessarily like a do-good for the community but more of a sense of we recognize that we need the other to help and shape and to help us understand ourselves better, because we begin to see Christ in them, in spaces that Christ is shining and working in their lives, and that begins to shape us and helps us understand and helps us live more into the story that we are called to live into, which makes us distinct people. Which drives us to some of our founders of holiness doctrine, particularly John Wesley, who begins to talk about prevenient grace, that grace has gone before us, and that there's nothing we can do to receive grace. It's a gift that God has given. And then we get to the point of justification, which justification is the point in which we recognize or we acknowledge that Jesus is the one that saves us and is forming us. And so this may not necessarily have started at a particular point, but it's a process of becoming, but we begin to acknowledge it at that point. And also, as soon as we have repented and turned away and been justified by Christ, we are beginning moving towards entire sanctification, which is the point of being Christian perfection, and not in a sense of like perfect as in like errorless or not sinning anymore or being perfect in like a Western sense, but more in a sense of purpose, and that we are living into what God is calling us to be, and that we are fully living into what we've been called to. Wynkoop oftentimes talks about this, particularly in social, that it's a process of becoming, and that we're being cleansed from the inside out, and that Christ is continually shaping and molding us to have us become more in the image of Christ. And it is filling us to the point of being overwhelmed with love. It's not to a point of like, we get to a point and you stop, but it's more of like overcoming or becoming fully extent into love. And we always can grow in love to be more and more into the image that Christ has made us into.